In the previous video, I gave you the challenge to try to update the car resolver so that it returns data from the database. So now we're going to do that together. So I have the car resolver open, and for the first query, all we need to do is say models.car.findAll to return all the cars. Then for a single car, we need to say return models.car.findByPrimaryKey, and then we pass in the ID. So for creating the car, remember we need to remove the ID because the ID creation is automatic, and we need to say return models.car.createCar. For removing a car, we can remove all of this code and say return models.car.destroy, and we need to pass in a where statement, and we can say where there is an ID, which is what we pass in as part of the argument. And then last but not least, we have car, where we say return, and we say models.user.findByPrimaryKey, and we need to say parent dot, and then user ID is the field that we are after. Now, because we did this change for the mutation, we also need to update the schema for the mutation here, so we will not need the ID to create the car. Okay, so hopefully we've done all these changes now, so let's go ahead and start up our application. Visit the playground as well and see if now everything works. Okay, so we have an error in here. Okay, so this application is running somewhere. Probably I did a test, so let me do this. Okay, so we have everything in place now, and we can do a test. Go back to the playground and see if we get some data. So that works. Let's do the same for cars. Let's do make and model for the car. Okay, so that works as well. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is do something like, say, user ID1, name of this user, and then the car and the make and the model for that car for this user. Okay, so we have an error here, find by primary key of undefined. So this is in user, the user resolver. Let's see here. So that was, let's do some debugging together. So this is line number 8. Oh, that should be a lowercase s right there. Okay, so let's do this again. Okay, so we get null, which is not what we were expecting. So let's take a look at what's going on here. So we have select ID name from users as user, where user.id is equal to 1. So this is the right query. So let's see if we can take a look at MySQL Workbench and do a select on users. So we do have the user, and then we do have the cars, and then we have a car for this user. So let's do some additional debugging and see why we're not actually getting a user when we're asking for a single user. And I can already see that every time when we have the curly brackets here, we need to explicitly specify the return keyword. So let's just make sure that it's added everywhere in user and in car as well. Okay, so that should now work. Let's go back to the playground. Okay, now that works. Car, make, and model, and there we go. So now we have a user and the car for that user. We can do users and list all the cars for all the users, and we can do this the other way around as well, right? We can say cars, give us the color of all the cars that we have. We have that, and what we can do is something very interesting. We could say owner, and then the name of the owner of these cars. So a black car is owned by myself apparently. Susan owns a red one, Stephen yellow, and a green one. So let's do make, and let's do cars ID3. I'm just going to show you a very interesting query. Car ID3, so it's a Fiat owned by Stephen. And let's say, okay, we want to ask what other cars does Stephen own? Well, we could say car and make, and that would then return the additional car as well. So, you know, this particular query can cycle back through the owner and then get the car again, even though we are starting the query from car. Okay, so at this point, we have our GraphQL service ready, right? We have a database where we can insert data. The association of that data is done automatically by the SQLize package and by the database itself, and then we can query for that data from a GraphQL endpoint, and data is automatically comes back to us in the way and in the format that we want from the database directly. So we've achieved a working and a functional GraphQL endpoint that we could now leverage in an application. And what we're going to do is in fact create an application to see how we can consume this, and then later on we're going to extend this GraphQL endpoint to add authentication as well.